Alright guys, today we're going to look over the answers for the market failure and externalities activity that you started doing. And we're going to go one at a time. I had started putting together the first couple, but I'm going to go through them all with you here. First and foremost, this is just a quick explanation. If you want more help, please see me. The first question is about cattle producing methane, which is a greenhouse gas. This is a negative producer externality. The consumers aren't the ones creating the social cost to society, it's the producers. We'll see the graph here in a second, but possible ways to intervene for the government. You could tax the cattle farmers, or you could create laws to limit cattle production. So if we start with the marginal private cost curve, this is the curve that's going to be moving to the left. And you can see that there's a social cost that's to the left of the private cost, a social cost that is greater or reduces the overall quantity of that good. In this case, knowing that social cost gives us a new socially optimal price and quantity. A socially optimal price and quantity, I'm not so much worried about the price as I am. If you look at the quantity, the socially optimal quantity should be lower than the original equilibrium quantity. In other words, because of the external cost to society, there should be less cattle production. And you can see up on the graph, the shaded yellow triangle shows the deadweight loss for this marketplace, because as it stands, there is a disconnect or a difference between the social and private cost. And what we need to do is make the private cost match the social cost in some way, either through taxing the farmers or restricting the overall supply, which laws limiting the production of cattle should do. Number two, opening a new football stadium in a community boosts demand for several businesses. This is a spillover effect of a positive producer externality. How could we intervene and create those sort of opportunities? You could certainly subsidize the stadium project. And I tried to come up with another example. Certainly subsidizing or paying outright for the stadium is the best example. But you could have tax breaks for the team or the stadium, or the stadium businesses like the vendors who operate there, for setting up in that community. That's certainly also another option. When you graph this, a positive producer externality increases the cost. So now we see the marginal social cost increasing, moving to the right. And that creates a lower socially optimal price. But again, we're not really worried so much about price as we are overall quantity. We want to increase the quantity in this marketplace to the increased socially optimal level, as you can see down here. To do that, you would have to find a way to increase the supply or the marginal cost curve. Subsidies would do that, or simply tax breaks would also do that if there were taxes already in this marketplace, which we might not know for sure. Number three, a rise in the popularity of camping in summer months increases the chance of dangerous wildfires. This is a negative consumer externality. How could you stop this? You could have laws that would limit how much camping could be done. You could have fees or additional fees placed on camping, which, if you've ever gone to a national park, there are fees to get in, so that's part of the reason why. So limit the overall consumption or overall use of camping. You also could have advertising, and as much as you might think advertising wouldn't work here, ask yourself about Smokey the Bear, and only you can prevent forest fires. That's a pretty good example. So this is a negative consumer externality. This is our first example of that. So we have the marginal social benefit curve being to the left of being less than the marginal private benefit curve. The social benefit is overall worse because of increased forest fires, but you also have traffic and congestion and noise pollution, all that sort of thing. So the goal here would be to reduce the overall quantity down to a socially optimal level. If you go camping, you don't want to see all those negative effects. So we want to decrease the private benefit curve to match the new social benefit curve. In order to do that, and we're going to then decrease the quantity down below, we could, like I said, we could tax it, we could charge fees for getting in, we could advertise or to limit, ways to limit the quantity of camping events, that sort of thing. Number four, a highly educated workforce pays more taxes, allows for the government to make additional benefits to the government infrastructure and the like. This is a positive consumer externality, although I can understand how you get away with wanting to argue positive producer. Positive consumer externality, how do we how do we fix this in the marketplace? We could subsidize education, or we could make laws requiring people to go. Here we've got our new graphs that started. The marginal private benefit curve is too low. We see an increased marginal social benefit. And the whole idea here with externalities is that the social benefit is desirable. And we want to try to achieve this quantity is socially optimal. To do that, we could subsidize or require you to go to school, something you know all too much about. That would increase the marketplace out to that socially optimal level. How do we find the deadweight loss? You always start with what the socially optimal equilibrium point is, and then I strongly encourage you to draw a line from the original equilibrium up or down to the socially optimal level we just identified. So in this case, we're going up to, and then the equilibrium of the deadweight loss is the area created. I call it an arrow or a triangle pointing at the socially optimal level. That's a deadweight loss if nothing is taken into account. Again, the idea of government intervention is to eliminate that deadweight loss to reach and achieve that socially optimal level in the marketplace. Number 5, new malaria vaccine has a chance, reduces the chance that one sick person will spread their illness. This is another positive consumer externality. Again, we could subsidize vaccines or legislate the minimum consumption of vaccines. If you haven't noticed, in the United States, we see free flu shots being given out everywhere, over-subsidized or subsidized to the point that they're free. We also have laws in the United States about you need to have a vaccine before you can start public education. All these things are, the goal here is to increase to the socially optimal level. Our social benefit curve is far out to the right compared to the private benefit. And we're going to get then a socially optimal level, just like before, that is higher. We want to produce more vaccines. And as I just got done saying, we can do that with subsidies or legal minimum consumption of vaccines in order to make sure people are healthier. The overall benefit isn't just to the one sick person, it's to the rest of the society that we don't get sick in addition for that. Number 6, the construction of a new dam will wipe out several popular fishing streams, reducing the number of tourists coming to an area for recreational purposes. I tried to come up with a negative producer example that wasn't not necessarily about pollution, about spillover effects of having this in your area. You could have taxes or laws against dam construction. This is our first example of a negative. I think this is our first example of a negative producer externality anyway. We have the marginal social cost being less than the marginal private cost. And when we do that, we see that we have a socially optimal level that is lower than the original equilibrium level, indicating that there's market failure. I didn't draw the deadweight loss in the previous example. Well, to find deadweight loss, you always want to start with a socially optimal equilibrium point. You always then next want to go from the original equilibrium point up or down to the social optimal curve. And as you're going to find as you do these examples, the equilibrium level always points to, or the deadweight loss always points to the new socially optimal price quantity level. So in this case, it's an arrow or as I look at it, it's a triangle pointing toward the socially optimal level, pointing left, as a negative deadweight loss, negative producer externality. Last example, lead paint used by Chinese toy manufacturers is making consumers sick. This is another example of a negative producer externality, something that happened in the early 2000s in the United States. We can see increased taxes or consumer protection laws because the goal here is again that we have a higher social cost. The cost to the toy manufacturers in China is not quite the same as all the costs of people getting sick in the United States. So the goal would be to decrease the quantity in some way in the marketplace to a socially optimal level. You can do that through laws or regulations or taxes or tariffs. Again, to find the deadweight loss, you always start with a socially optimal equilibrium point. And then next you find the original equilibrium point and draw a line up or down to the social curve that you just drew. And then if you shade this area in, this should give you the deadweight loss in the marketplace until the externality is corrected. And again, you can correct that through taxes or legislation that restricts the use or the production of these toys in the marketplace. There you have it. If you have any questions about these examples, please let me know. Again, I forgot to do the deadweight loss there, but the goal is that you see that without any intervention, the marketplace has social spillover effects that the government or the market needs to correct in some way.